We'll like to start with this session. Thank you for your patience. There was, I think, some technical difficulties. Okay. So, welcome to this Heredity Life Sciences, an ISO 9001 2015 certified company. And welcome to this webinar. Uh, welcome to the webinar on scientific research, writing, and publications. That has been organized by Heritage Life Sciences. We are basically situated at KIT TBI of KIT University, Bhubaneswar, Odisha. And myself, I am Dr. Pratish Kumar Das, the research scientist of the Training and Innovation Department of Heritage Life Sciences Private Limited. So, coming to the topic, as we are all very much interested to know about what is this publications, because nowadays it has been told that either publish or perish. This is a statement that is not given by me, but by everyone, those who are involved in this publication processes, or those who are involved in any kind of research, let it be students or it may be faculties or some research scholars. So why we need to publish? So the main question arises over here is why we need to publish, and for that we have one of the reasons may be the profile enrichment. That is the enrichment of our own profile or our own CV to bring more weightage to that. Or the second one is job opportunities. For getting good job opportunities or for going abroad, we need to have good number of papers and in for getting placed in some government agencies like ICMR funded institutes or CSR funded institutes. You have to have a good publication background. And then is your promotion. So promotion in our day-to-day job lives, like nowadays it has been made mandatory for the doctors even. Those who are the doctors, to get promotion they have to also publish some papers. Previously it was publications by medicos was very rare in India. It was a kind of trend going on in the foreign countries like US and Australia, but nowadays we are also in India also, the doctors are facing the same thing. And then the university mandates, as we know that when there is this deemed universities and this UGC controlled universities, they are being provided with some mandates as we come across this NIRF rankings. Now most of the universities are in a uh, race, in a long race to reach at the top of that NIRF ranking. So in that case also the publications counts, because each publication or publication by any of the person, and each publication, let it be review or it may be a research article, it holds some kind of point that is being awarded during, and that is being counted during the NRF rankings. Like if you get a Scopus index paper, then it counts for around 0.5 points. And similarly for the impact factors paper, SCI index paper, we have some higher points, and intermediary points are there in case of Web of Science. So like this, so the more the universities are now running, there is a long race that we have to publish more and more papers so that we get to the top of the NRF ranking. And then advertisement and marketing strategies. You can come across many companies. Those are providing some kinds of services or some kinds of other research opportunities. So those companies, they are also publishing. But what is the need of publishing? They do not need to publish anything because they are the company itself. But what they are doing, this is a kind of advertisement and marketing strategy. If I am selling you a kind of let us say a kind of DNA primers or oligonucleotides, then I will try to publish some kind of papers on those fields, so that whenever I approach a customer, then I can show that yes, these are some of the projects that we have carried out, or these are some of the papers we have been working upon, and this is our specialty. So that in that way, that particular customer will get attracted towards that particular company. And the next two part is the idea dissemination and passion. Why this one I have labeled it in red? It is only because a very rare group of people go for publications only to disseminate their research idea and for passion. Very rarely people follow this, that either they have to they want publications to disseminate their research ideas. They want people to know all over the world that yes, this is a new field, upon this one can work, and can gain some amount of knowledge. And next is the passion. So there are some people who are doing over this, who are publishing only for these purposes, but very rare. So these are some of the needs why we need to publish. So the frequently asked questions, if I go through these frequently asked questions, there are what, how, where, will, what if. So what means what I should publish. The first question raises upon in the mind of the student or anyone who is new to the research, that what I should publish. Should I publish a research article or should I publish a review paper? And then how I can publish, whom should I approach, what is the procedure, and then the next question is where I should publish, what is the typical journal, what journal will be there suitable for me to publish my papers, and then the fourth question is one of the fourth and fifth questions are one of the most important in everyone's life. It comes up in our mind whenever we are going to publish a paper or when we are going to submit a paper to a journal, that will it get accepted. So will it get accepted is one of the questions that crops up in everyone's mind. And the next question is that what if it gets rejected. So these are the questions that bothers us much more as compared to other things. But these two questions are really we should not focus upon when we are submitting a paper or when we are planning to publish a paper, but rather on the other three aspects. Because will the paper get accepted or rejected, we don't know. But we can put our focus, or we can put our whole focus on that, how we are making how we are preparing our papers. So the technique, there is a technique to prepare to write a paper, because how much it may be that your work may be very much very good, of very good quality, but if you are, until and unless you are unable to present your paper in a proper way, it will definitely get rejected from journals. And then if there are sometimes it happens that this publication process is also not everything about talent, but it sometimes happens that uh, due to bad luck your paper may get rejected, because whenever a paper goes to a particular journal, they transfer it to some kind of reviewers, and then some reviewers they very succinctly and very elaborately they go through the papers, and then they give their comments. But what happens sometimes, due to their some other work responsibilities and due to pressurizing from the journal side, that you have the deadline, you have to submit this review within this amount of time, what they do, they just superficially look over the paper and they give their decision. At that time there is a chance that the paper may get rejected. And then what if the paper get rejected? So here the question is that there is nothing to bother about that. What happens if the paper gets rejected? Because this is a continuous process, it goes on, that acceptance and rejection, these are a part and parcel of our life in every day, in every sphere of our life, and similarly in case of publications. So if our paper gets rejected and the reviewer, we have got some good reviews, then we should be thankful to the reviewers, in fact, that yes, our paper has been rejected, and they have provided some comments that what are the grounds on which we are rejecting your paper. So working on that particular comments, we can even publish a better paper. So that is why we should not get disheartened by this rejection part. Then coming to this, what we should publish, either it is a research or a review. So obviously, if we divide the research and review, then in research we have the abstract. If we go towards the formatting part or the format of the research and review papers, then in research we have abstract, followed by keywords, and then introduction, methodology, results, discussion, conclusion, and references. And similarly, in review papers, we have the abstract followed by the keywords and then the introduction. But we don't have, or will in review papers lack this methodology, results, and discussion part. You can tell that discussion part is somewhat involved in this review paper, but not the methodology and the results part. So in that, what we do after the introduction, we can divide the paper into several subheadings related to that topic, and then a conclusion followed by the references. Now, what is the work of this research article? A research article reports the results of original research, and it assesses the contribution to the body of knowledge in a given area and is published in a peer-reviewed scholarly journal. So these are the what I told you that they consist of this several things like abstract introduction, keywords, methods, results, and discussion, conclusion. Acknowledgement can be optional. That is when we want to acknowledge if we have got some help from someone else while preparing the paper, but he is not eligible for getting the authorship. Then we can simply acknowledge him or her. And then the conflict of interest and the references and authors' contributions. Now, if we go to the types of research articles, then basically there are two types of research articles. One need to understand that research articles are not of only a single type, but are of two types. One is the primary research articles, and another one is the secondary research articles. So, what are these primary research articles? Whenever we are conducting a self-conducted research is done, and when we are targeting a specific research question. And for example, suppose if I am working on nanoparticles and I'm working on the role of nanoparticles in
Excuse me,
eradication of,
sir.
yeah,
Hello.
yes,
Sorry to interrupt you, sir. Can you please put the slideshow on?
yeah, the slides are on.
Slideshow, sir. Like full screen, the slides.
Okay, 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 full screen, okay. Yeah, now is
Okay.
it visible?
Yeah. Thank you.
Fine. So when we are going to the research article types, then there are primary and the secondary. So primary research articles are the articles that are self-conducted, or these are the research that we are doing in our lab, and then we are working upon it. We are going to a particular, going through a particular objective. We are identifying certain research gaps, because whenever we are starting a research, how you need to focus to a research. First, we have to select a title, but before going for the title selection, how we should know that which title we should take. Suppose if I am interested in a field like environmental biotechnology, then I would look for I'll look for the current environmental problems that are going on. So that is my first selection criteria. Then I will get around 10 or 15 problems. 10 to 15 problems I'll have with me, and then I will go on shortlisting from them only one or two topics, and out of that I will go pinpointed to one of the topic. So before going to that particular topic, I need to do a lot of literature review. That what work has been done till date, and what is being currently done, what is being currently going on in this field, and then what are the research gaps, means the area that has been focused upon, or the research that has been conducted and is going on. Among those research activities, where are the loopholes, or where are some of the portions where you can work or I can work, and then that will be my research topic. And then when I am working it using some objectives, I'll frame some objectives to fill up that loophole or fill up that gap, research gap. We call it as research gap. Then we can go for the work. We can design the work or a methodology, and then we can work upon it. So these, out of that, whenever we publish an article, then that one is known as your primary research articles. Obviously these require a budget and a long period of time, you can say, because as you are conducting it and then you reach a conclusion, you have to write about all the results and discussions. So it is a time taking work, and obviously it will need some budget as we require the chemicals and some instruments. But in case of secondary research articles, these are conducted by others. Means not the research articles, but exactly the research are conducted by some others. So you get the data from other researchers. Then it is necessary to understand what research has already been conducted. For this secondary also, secondary research articles, for preparation of secondary research article or secondary research, you need to understand what research has already been conducted in that field. Now let us talk about the case studies. This case studies are what you go to a suppose you collaborate with some 4 to 5 hospitals, and suppose you are working on a field like let us say you are working on urinary tract infections. So you are trying to write a secondary research article on urinary tract infection. So you will definitely collaborate with certain hospitals and have to fetch data of the patients that were admitted over there since let us say last 1 year or last 2 year. Those patients were getting admitted, and you have to face their reports. That is what is their in-house case reports, and what is their biochemical test reports, and out of that you need to synthesize your own tables. That will be your that will form your result part, and then you have to uh, prepare your own discussion. So basically, this is cheap as well as quick, because you don't need any chemicals or instruments, and quick in the sense because you don't have to perform any experiment, but you are only playing with the data from fetched from some other sources, and you are synthesizing it. But these are obviously research. Why not review? Because in this part, you are taking the raw data, and then what you are doing, you are converting it into a final form, or you are giving it a shape that can be understood by everyone, and that has a particular application. So that is why these are also a kind of research articles. So these are the secondary research articles. Now coming to the review articles, it provides a comprehensive summary of a research on a certain topic. When we are writing these review articles, you cannot. It is always advised that these review articles must be written by leaders or someone who is well experienced in a particular discipline or a particular topic. And it can be that you can voluntarily submit a review article, or it is invited from the side of a journal. The editor will invite someone who is very renowned in that particular field to write a review article for the journal. So in this way, you can write reviews, and reviews are very much what extensive. I can tell that they are very elaborate, and consist of a large number of pages. You can see some of the review articles even get published with 120 and 130 pages, almost the size of a thesis. So the review articles are very much extensive, and what it is, it is basically they are highly cited, because in a review article you will get all the details about a particular topic. So whenever you are working on a research article, it happens that you are specifically bothered about your results, nothing else. But in a review, but in the same way, if you write a review on the urinary tract infections, then it will collaborate, or it will take into account many aspects of urinary tract infections, like how these urinary tract infections are caused, what are the microorganisms involved, and what are the antibiotics administered, what is the mode of the action of antibiotics. So these many things are involved in a review article, but in research article, the one you are focusing on, you may not have to mention each and every aspect of this particular topic. So these are also having high number of uh, citations. So they will have more than 100 of references. So that is why whenever we are writing a paper, we generally follow a review article for some theoretical knowledge, and also to derive some more citations, because we can give cross references in our article. Now, if we go for the types of review, then there are two kinds of review. One is the narrative, and another one is the systematic. So, in case of a narrative review, this is called as a traditional review, and nowadays many of the journals are not expecting such kind of review from the authors. If it is a narrative review, then there is a chance that they may return back your review, that telling that it is not suitable for their journal. So, it is a traditional review where whenever you are writing over in a narrative review, suppose you are writing on a topic like environmental pollution. So this is a broader topic, and which has a very broad sense, or a very broad number of what points that should be included. So there is no particular what specification about the topic. It is about environmental pollution. So whenever you are sending it to a journal, why that journal will be what why it should be interested in a broader topic, because everyone knows about something, or something, or much more thing about the environmental pollution. Then why to go for this kind of review? So that is why these reviews were previously in fashion, but nowadays these are being uh, these are being submission of this kind of reviews are being discouraged. Now coming to the systematic review, in this kind of review, what is there? You have to focus on a particular topic. Like if I'm going for environmental pollution in narrative review, I can go for a topic like entitled as role of nano zero valent iron in remediation of chromium contaminated soils. So this is a kind of what? In this case, what happens? This was about environmental pollution, and this one is about only a specific heavy metal pollution in soil, and what is the role of nano zero valent iron, or that is the nanoparticles, in the remediation of that, or in taking cleaning the environment from this particular from this heavy metals. So these are the systematic review where there will be you have to write about some there will be abstract and there will be some kind of introduction. An introduction where you will define that what is the topic, why you have chosen the topic, what is the purpose, what is the main problem because of which you have chosen this topic. So the problem shows that if there is there are some problems, what is the root cause of that problems, and how these problems can be cured or how these problems can be elevated. So this is the way in which a systematic review is approached. And in this case, you will also go for studying many various papers, and then finally, what you have to do at the end, you have to nowadays most of the journals they ask for a hypothetical model. So whenever there is a hypothesis, because nowadays whenever there is a review or when you send a research paper or a review paper to a journal, then the editor or else when the editor sends it to a reviewer, then the first part what we reviewer do, because as I have also reviewed many of the papers, what we do, we first check that whether the paper is novel or not. So the novelty statement is more important, and that is why so you will be thinking that yes, research paper we are doing our own work, so it will be a original work, so that may be novel. But how a review paper can be novel? So nowadays, if I am working on a particular topic, if I am publishing a paper, review paper on a particular topic, then there is no hard and fast rule that nobody else can publish a paper on that particular topic. If I'm publishing a review paper on heavy metal pollution, then there may be some other people in this world who may be publishing a book chapter or a review paper on this heavy metal pollution. Then what is the novelty of your work? The topics are same, you are focusing on the same discipline, so what is the novelty? That is why now most of the journals ask for a systematic review where you have to give a hypothetical model, you have to study about the research or the reviews that have been conducted by the earlier scientists or in the earlier days, and then out of that you have to synthesize your own data and then give your own idea that yes, if possible you can put forward a hypothesis that if we follow this and this process, then it may be beneficial for the future society. And you have to also show certain in the conclusion part also you have to mention that how this review paper is going to help in further future and how your hypothetical model can be experimented. So this is the difference between the narrative and systematic review. Now, coming to this, the different parts of a review, there is also another kind of review that is known as a mini review. So, whenever there are some journals that accept mini reviews that range for around 8 to 10 pages long, these are 8 to 10 pages long. And so, in this, what happens? The first part is you have to provide background and rationale for conducting the literature review. So, why you are conducting this research? As I told you, what is the problem? What is the research gap? And what is the source cause of the problem? You have to identify. Then you have to state what are the objectives of your review article, why you are writing this review article. So there is a statement after the introduction, at the end of the introduction generally, when you go through the papers, you can see that the authors intend to show this and this aspect of this, or the author uh, want to discuss this aspects of this current problem. So this is the primary objectives. You have to state what are the objectives and then concisely describe reproducible methods. As you are writing the review paper, you will be asking that what are the methods. But you have to write in there is not a separate method section because some of the journals they ask for a method section in the review paper, but in maximum of the journals you can introduce these methods as a part of the introduction at the end of the introduction, that how you have collected the data, how you have selected the keywords, and what are your criteria for choosing all those information, and why you basically worked on this topic. So this is the methods. And then the results can be summarized into two kinds of mini reviews. One is your quantitative mini review and another one is the descriptive mini review. So in this quantitative mini review, as the name suggests, so it will deal with the quantitative results in a result section. So there may not also be a result section, but you can also include. So in this case, there will be data that have been isolated from other papers. So you can also from those data you can you can prepare your own data sheet or your own tables or graphs and then develop the figures. So once you have collected the quantitative data, you can develop figures and tables that summarize the key findings from your data collection. Similarly, in descriptive mini review, it will describe the key findings. That is, it will get the summary of a case study. So there will be many case studies. So you have to get the summary of each case studies and then convert it into tables or figures. Similarly, in the discussion part, in quantitative mini review, there is a you have to develop a discussion on the key papers and key themes identified in the review, highlight the knowledge gaps. So what you have to do, what you are proposing and what the work have been done, what is the knowledge gaps within that, or what are the research gaps that are present till date, and then you have to develop a discussion that whatever the work has been done, what is being currently going on, and where it is lacking. So this is the discussion part. But in the descriptive mini review, you have to suggest applications of the findings. Whatever the findings that you have developed in the form of figures and tables, out of that you have to suggest that what can be these future applications in some industry or in some conservation project or in healthcare like this, and suggest the direction for future research, that your what your review proposes, that how the future research can be undertaken in this particular on that particular field. Now coming to the different parts of these papers. So the first part, or the one of the most essential part, is the abstract. So it provides obviously the overview of the work, and it should draw the reader's attention, should be succinct to the point, should be structured, should highlight important outcomes and novelty of the work, should consist of short sentences. Because during my when I review papers, I have also seen many of the authors, when they send their papers, their sentences are generally 3 to 4 line in length, and in that case it makes a confusion, or it creates a confusion in our mind or in the mind of the reviewers. And at that time, if we are unable to understand that what the author has been what the author has been trying to explain, then at that time we can point it out as a serious grammatical error, and it can be a kind of what it can be a source of rejection. That will be a point upon which the reviewer can reject a paper. So that is why we should always focus on using short sentences that should be vivid and should be self-explanatory. And in an abstract, what abstract should be there? There are two kinds of abstract. One was earlier used, that is a generalized abstract, where you write about the what your paper is all about, only about the problem, and then go on discussing about the various aspects. So what you have on which point you have addressed that particular topic. So that is the abstract. But nowadays we are also going for a structured abstract, and it is most likely being followed by every journals, where you have to write a first 1 or 2 lines about the introduction or about the problem, then followed by the whatever you have done, that is what is the problem, and what are being the other elements that are being caused from that problem, or what is the results of that problem, or whether that particular issue is creating some havoc in the environment or on the human health or something like that. And then the third part is your the results. In this case, you have to mention whatever the results that you have got in short, within 2 to 3 lines in your abstract. And you cannot explain all the parts of your result, but you have to focus on the most important results that you have got in your paper. In that case, whenever there will be some kind of negative results, if you have obtained some positive and some negative results, it is better advised to just put a mask, or just do not discuss about the negative results in the abstract. Better to go for the positive results. In this way, the structured abstract can be done, and over there you have to also highlight the important outcomes. Uh, what what is the outcome that you have obtained from this particular result, and how this work is novel, or how this work is different from other researches or other research that has been carried out. So this is a generally a kind of abstract, the structured abstract that is being followed nowadays. Then this is another important aspect, that is selection of keywords, because every time whenever there is you submit a paper to a journal, they mention that please mention 5 to 6 keywords for indexing purposes or for listing. So this is what we generally think, that many of the people also don't know that yes, this is just the keywords, but what is the use of these keywords? Actually, the journals also means actually it does not help the journal, but it in fact help the authors. These keywords help the authors. How? These keywords decides how the paper gets listed in search results. So if you are having a paper on, suppose the molecular aspects of some particular gene, then whenever you are going to search on molecular aspects of, suppose there is a gene that is TP53, then molecular aspects of TP53, then when you type that, then there will be many papers that have already been published on the molecular aspects of TP53. So where your paper lies in the Google page, when you are searching, whether it is lying on the first page, or it is on the second page, or it is on the page number 100 or page number 50, because the far or the below, if your search result, if you're while searching that paper, if your paper is found on page number let us say 10, then nobody is going to search until page number 10, because whenever we are doing a literature search for our work, then we'll go for the first 2 pages. We generally go for the first 2 pages, whatever there are papers, because they are, those are the most matching papers according to us, and we do not like to waste time going for page number 10 or page number 40. And in that case, if your paper is found on the page number 10 of Google search, then nobody is going to download your paper or view your paper, and as a result, your paper will have no citations, and so there will be no increase in your profile or in your scholar metrics. So that is why the keywords needs to be judiciously selected. So it should not be too short or too long. And then, because why this happens, because if you are giving it a too long, if it is a too long keyword, then it will be very much difficult for the part of the journal to get it indexed or listed. And if it is too short, suppose if you are working on some amount of let us say if you are working on immunology part, and if you are using a chemical that is known as bovine serum albumin, so you can put it as bovine serum albumin. It is neither too short nor too long, but it can be. It is one of the chemical that is being used, so you can use as one of the keyword. But if you try giving a like a keyword like amino acid, then this amino acid means it is a broader sense. There are many kinds of amino acid. You have not mentioned which is the particular amino acid. So in that case, your paper may get lost, because someone would have given a particular kind of amino acid. Because if I'm going to search for a particular amino acid like glycine, then I'll definitely type glycine in the Google Scholar or in the Google search page. But your keyword is not glycine, your it is amino acid. You may have worked upon glycine, but you have mentioned amino acid as one of the keyword. Then over there, your paper will get lost in this transit. So that is why it is an important part of your manuscript. You can include certain techniques or specific methodology that you have used in your particular paper, and then avoid using words present in the title, because the title words are already indexed or these are already listed. Whenever the first thing the journal does is that it lists the words of your title, so there is no need to repeat the same words that are already present in your this title. And then you can go for performing keyword research, that is also advisable. So this keyword research is a very complicated task, not a complicated one, but once you get to understand it, you can perform it, and you can easily use the keywords that are required for a paper, so that it will get high citations, and it will be highly recognized, or it will be read by maximum number of readers. So for this also, we are also conducting a 3 months online training course starting from 10th September, where you will get the details if you would like to join. Then going to the introduction part. So the introduction also should contain the problem, the reasons for the problem to occur, the effects. So what are the effects occurring of that of the problem? Then you have to frame your objectives. The objectives of your work should be an important part, and always take in mind that whenever you are conducting a research, let it be a PhD research, or it may be any agency research, agency based research, or a dissertation thesis, then kindly keep your objectives very less. A objective of one objective can do good, even if not a two or three objectives at best for a PhD work or for a research work. More than three objectives will not only consume more time, but it will also create a lot of confusion and lot of questions can be raised based upon that. So keep your objectives very profound and very what specific. Then you have to also mention, as I said in the conclusion, in the ending part of the introduction, the solution that has been presented in your manuscript. Now, coming to the methods, this should be self-explanatory. Self-explanatory in the sense that whenever you are writing some methods, then whoever goes through your paper, he may be able to self-replicate that. Means why we go for the methods part of a paper, because we want to know how that person has conducted that particular research. So we will be conducting that research by going through that paper. For our some other kind of we have some other kind of objectives, but we need some of the help from one of the papers, then we go through the method. So that method should be self-explanatory. If it is not self-explanatory, then the readers or the audience will not get interested towards your paper. It should be must be sufficient enough to help the readers recreate the experiments. As I said, the methods used can be extensively described or shortly mentioned as per the need. So each and every time you don't need to go on extensively describing the methods, and the already established protocols may not be mentioned in complaint. Like suppose if you are going, everyone knows that what is serial dilution. If you are isolating a bacteria, everyone knows what is serial dilution. Everyone knows what are the biochemical test, what is MRVP test, what is indole test, what is cited agar test. Everyone knows that. So there is no need to go on writing about the protocols or the steps involved in serial dilution, in the steps involved in gram staining, or in the steps in the biochemical test. In that case, you can cite a paper that has already this protocol published. You can mention that the serial dilution, the bacterial isolation was carried out by performing, suppose, a standard biochemical test, and you can provide the reference from which the paper you have gone through this protocol. So in that case, you don't have to write about each and every biochemical test that are present. Then, if there is a new or synthesized, that is your modified protocol, because sometimes what happens, the researchers, when you work, then you derive a new protocol, or you mention a new protocol. So in that case, it should be discussed in detail. Or else, if you have done some kind of modifications in an already established protocol, and you have standardized it, then that modified protocol should also be discussed in detail. And I said, in case of reviews, the mode and methods used in data collection and analysis may be mentioned without any separate heading. Now coming to the results and discussion part, these are exactly the two different sections. Result is one section and discussion is another section, but they can also be combined to form a single section. So this depends on the author who is writing the paper or the thesis, on what will be more feasible to him. Basically, as I prefer that results and discussion combined section is more preferable. But in some cases, some authors also prefer for the results and discussion as two separate sections, because whenever there is a result and discussion at one place, then at each result we can discuss it at the same time. Just below the result, we can discuss about the results and the other discussions, so that whenever a reader goes through this result and discussion part, he will be looking on a particular figure and then will be reading about it corresponding discussion below it. So it will be very much easy for the reader to go through that. And what happens in case of result and discussion, if they are two different parts, then at that case the result will be at one page, and in the next page there will be the discussion. So every time the reader has to turn pages and look at the figure or table and then go through the discussion, so as to learn about this, what are the work that have been done. So the result section should contain all the figures, tables and graphs, along with calculations and analysis as well as interpretations. So what your result tells, that should be included in the result section, not the discussion. But what the discussion section will reflect, it will reflect the significance of a work in current scientific scenario. That means it will compare what the results we have obtained or you have obtained by the current work, and what are the similar or opposite results that have been obtained from researchers and researchers that have conducted this the same kind of study in an earlier stage. So if there are some contradictory results, then you have to defend your result, that why your result is also, you don't have to tell that as their result is contradictory to you, then you cannot mention that their result is having some amount of fault, or their experiment is flawed. No, but you have to defend your own work, that yes, if they have got some positive results, I am getting the opposite result to that. This may be because of that. It may be due to the changes in environmental circumstances, or it may be due to the changes of media nutrients, like that. You have to go through each and every what it is. This particular discussion is a kind of a debate. So in that case, you have to defend your results with all the results that have been obtained in that particular field from earlier research, and then you have to draw a probable conclusion out of there. Then coming to the conclusion, this section will provide you a concluding statement which must include these following things. It should support the objectives of your work. So at the introduction, you must have uh, provided your objectives, 2 to 3 objectives. So in the conclusion, you must be able to mention that your work has fulfilled all the objectives or all the criteria that has been set up by the objectives. Second is, what is the advantages of the current work that you have done over others, and what are the future prospects of research that can arise from the current work. So these are the 3 things that needs to be accumulated into one paragraph and named as the conclusion. Now, coming to the referencing styles, most of the time we face the problem while arranging the references. So, generally, the 2 kinds of references that are being widely followed, that is the numbered citations. One is when there is a number inside your square bracket in line with the text, where the text ends over there, you have to provide a number and put it in a square bracket. Or you can provide a number at the superscript at the end of the sentence. So, these are the numbered citations. But there is also author date style. So in this author date style, what happens? The first author's name. If there is a someone is there, that if it is uh, I can tell that there is someone whose name is let us say he is John Terence. So Terence is the not what John is the Terence John. So if his name is Terence John and John is his family name, so this family name John will be present at this author position. Then a comma will be put, and then the date. Date means it's the year of that publications. Through that way, we can put the citation in the text. And then some of the major styles that are being followed by journals for reference list preparation are the APA, MLA, Harvard, and Vancouver. So these are the different reference styles. So these reference style, what happens? These reference style are nothing but at some places in one reference style they will ask for numbered citations. In some other reference style they will ask for this author date style citations. In author date style citation, when we write the reference or mention the references at the end of the manuscript, then it should be arranged in an alphabetical manner. So the name starting with A will be at the first position, followed by the that with B, and like this up to Z. But in the numbered citations, the citation that has been marked as number 1 in the manuscript, that complete citation will be present at the end of the manuscript as number 1. So in this way, these references differ from each other in a very narrow margin. Some of them require a comma in between the author's name. Some of them require a semicolon. Some of them require a volume number to be written as VOL dot. Some of them require the journal name to be abbreviated or shortened. Some of them require the journal name to be italicized. So these are the some of the changes that are present in each and every reference type. So according to that, we have to prepare our references. So for this, we have many softwares like there is EndNote, and there is Mendeley, and other softwares are there that can arrange your references without much time and without much effort. But what is the problem is that the end note comes with a subscription, or it comes with a price. Even the Mendeley, if you go for its full characteristics, if you go using it in a full version, then it also requires some kind of payment. So in that case, it is not feasible on everyone's part to pay a hefty amount, because like you cannot pay around $800 or like this for a EndNote subscription. So in the yearly subscription. So in that case, what we can do, we can also easily manage reference by using the Google Scholar as well as the DOI, that is the Crossref website. So about which it can be you can prepare that if you need a API type reference, you can do it from the Google Scholar itself. It will take some more time as compared to the softwares like EndNote and Mendeley, but still then it will be better when you are not paying something, but you are easily able to manage your reference. Now, as I told you, what is the novelty? What is the importance of novelty? Why? Because nowadays all the manuscripts are being rejected. If they are rejected at first, when you are sending a manuscript, and if it gets rejected, and there will be always a statement from the editor that it has been rejected on the grounds of novelty. Because if you have done an experiment, particular experiment, and some other people has also done that experiment before you, then there is no novelty in that. And if you have done a experiment, no doubt it may be a very good experiment, but there is, you cannot show a proper application of that experiment, then it lacks the novelty. Then if a manuscript is with high novelty, it will get noticed and accepted easily, but lack of novelty will lead to the rejection. So it is applicable to both research and review articles, as I said that, because review articles are also not spared from this novelty aspect. You have to show something that is not present in the previous reviews. So how is your paper different from others, and why these journals are asking for a novelty statement? Because if your paper is similar to that of a review published, let us say around 5 years back, and that paper, as it has been published around 5 years back, so all have been referring that since the last 5 years, many people have must have downloaded it. Now that suppose the paper that has been published in a journal before 5 years, it has been, let us published in a journal A, and now you are publishing the same kind of thing in journal B, then why that journal B will take your paper? Because your paper will never draw any kind of citations, because it is already present in an earlier paper and it is well renowned, as it has been in the market, in the publishing industries in last 5 years, it is well renowned. So no one will cite your articles, and as your article will not be cited, then the journal impact factor will not increase, or its citation will not increase, so it will not be beneficial. That is why they are asking for a novelty statement. Then coming from for the hypothetical design, so it is a must for the reviews, and it can be an added advantage for research papers also, because the data that you have collected during your research, and when you are writing a research papers, it is always advisable that you frame a hypothetical design, that using your data what can be done. It may be possible, there will be always a question mark that it may happen that your data can be organized into a hypothetical model, and that hypothetical model may help in future research in this way or that way. So it must be a kind of prediction you can provide, like in case of the use of in silico designs, like the in silico modeling, use of bioinformatics, what they do, they attach suppose there is they study on an antibiotic or something, so they attach a antibody with a ligand, and then they check that whether that particular drug is feasible for that particular disease or not. But it cannot be, we cannot completely claim that that particular drug that has been designed using in silico models is very much efficient until and unless we go for its animal testing. But still then, that is a kind of hypothetical model, and that creates a very high impact paper. So that is why these hypothetical models are important also for research paper, as well as it must be self explainable. They must put forward a novel idea that has all chances of feasibility, that has all the chances of feasibility. That means it may be, it will be feasible, but we don't know that it may or may not be feasible, but it may have the chances of feasibility. So that is, there is a may, or there is a question mark. So it should be a novel idea. and then it must be based upon logic. You cannot put forward a hypothetical design just like that. It should be logic and must be supported with scientific evidences whenever you are putting a design, and then it must provide an answer to the research question raised in a particular field. So whatever the hypothetical model that you are designing, that must have a answer to the research gap or to the problem, or it must provide a solution to that particular problem, and it should be simple and supported by sufficient evidences. So the hypothetical model may not be too complicated, so it should be simple so that a layman can understand out of that, or else anyone belonging from the scientific background, let it not be from that particular field also, but from the scientific background, can understand that what that hypothetical model intends to describe. Now coming to the as this was all about the publications, the major part of the publication is also cannot be denied is the ethics in publication. So ethics in publishing is generally it consists of these three different types of things, that is plagiarism, and another one is the copyright and data reuse and permissions. So in case of plagiarism, in case of plagiarism, what is that? Whenever we are trying to, this is a severe case of fraud that is being considered or that is being taken into account in this scientific world. And in this case, many of the students get into crossroads during publishing of thesis or papers. And as nowadays the UGC has made it a mandate that any kind of thesis or publication you have to publish, it should have a plagiarism level of less than 10%. So in that 10%, above 10% plagiarism will lead to rejection of your manuscript, or else whether if also they accept your paper gets accepted in a particular journal, but the UGC will not accept the same paper for the award of your PhD or the award of your thesis. So in this case, we have to strictly check into this plagiarism. So whenever you are copying a sentence from another author or another paper without giving the reference, and even if also we are copying it, even if we are copying the same sentence from another author and we are providing a reference, then also it is a kind of plagiarism, because we can take the we can read the sentence of another author or read a paragraph from one paper, and then we have to write it in interpret it in our own words, okay, in our own words, without changing or altering the meaning of what that earlier author has described. So that will not be a case of plagiarism. But if we are copy pasting the same statement with or without providing any kind of reference, then it is a plagiarism. But if it is a definition, because scientific definitions cannot be changed, so at that time we can put the definition within a double inverted comma, and then we can quote it in a double inverted comma, the complete sentence, and then can provide the reference from which we have copied that. Similarly, the plagiarism are of many types, and the once caught in this plagiarism, it is that is why it is being advised to avoid such kind of plagiarism issues, because once you have been caught in this plagiarism issue, then it may be that you may be banned from that particular journal for publishing, or considering the severity of the plagiarism, you may be banned from further research for around 5 to 10 years, or there may be a lifetime ban imposed upon you if you get your papers, if you're suppose if you have submitted a paper in like Nature, big journals like Nature, and there you get a plagiarism issue, then you will be completely banned from further research activities in, and you cannot publish your papers in many reputed journals. So that is the problem in this plagiarism. And then the copyright issues. So what you can copyright, or what you can copy from other sources, like data reuse and permissions. Whenever you are publishing a paper or a thesis, and you want to use a figure or a table from another source or another publisher, or another paper from a different author, then you have to obtain the permission that yes, I want to use this particular table or this figure from that particular author or publisher, either through mail or through a written note, and then only you can use those matter, because all those are copyrighted. So whenever you are publishing, even also if you have written a particular paper, and you want to copy paste the same one, suppose one there is two lines that you want to use in a different paper of yours. So the first paper is yours where you have two lines, and out that particular two lines you want to take it into a different paper of where you are also one of the author. In that case also there will be a plagiarism. You cannot take your own sentences that you have written in a particular journal to another journal. In that case also you need the permission of the that publisher, because that journal may issue a fraud case against you that this particular line was present in my journal, although it was written by you, but the copyright rests with me. So you have to check that whether the paper you have published is whether open access or it is a subscription based. So these are the two kinds of copyright things. So if it is a subscription based, you cannot go on posting it publicly. You can keep it with you, but you cannot post it anywhere you want. You can share it within your institution or within your research network. But if you are having an open access license, then you can publish it anywhere. You can post it in ResearchGate, you can post it in Facebook, or you can post it anywhere you on your own website or somewhere else also. So that is why you have to look for what kind of copyright that journal is being providing you. And whenever there is a subscription based copyright agreement, then you may not have to pay any amount. But if it is open access, then the complete right is now with you. So for that you have to pay uh, open access charges to the journal. So it is these open access charges are not that much low, but even there are journals that charge around 300 to 500 US dollars. Reputed journals, they charge for more of this 300 US dollar or 300 euro for this, making your article open access. So if it is feasible on you, if you are funded through a project, then you can definitely go for a open access article, or else you can go for the subscription based. Now coming to the indexing services. So whenever there is a publication, so first what we need to know, that is what I think when I go for a publication in a journal. First I check in which services this particular journal has been indexed. So whether it is Google Scholar, so these are the some of the indexing services. One is your Google Scholar, one is your Copernicus Index Copernicus, one is Scopus, then Web of Science, Science Citation Index, and Science Citation Index Expanded. Now, coming to this, if we go through this discussion one by one, Google Scholar was once upon a time was one of the good indexing services. Means it was regarded as a good indexing services for publication of PhD manuscripts and these papers. But nowadays, the UGC has stopped considering this Google Scholar journals. And similar is the Index Copernicus, being this is indexing services that are that is mainly based in Poland. So in this Index Copernicus, the journals are being indexed in Index Copernicus that is present in Poland. So this is also one of the worst indexing services I would like to tell. And please never go for trying to publish your paper in an Index Copernicus. It is better to publish your paper in a Google Scholar, so that you will get some citations. But Index Copernicus papers are not that much cited. So coming to a better class of indexing services, you can have Scopus. So this is the indexing services, minimum indexing services that is being required by the UGC nowadays. So this Scopus is nothing but a part of the Elsevier. So this Elsevier has its database named as Scopus, where your article has been indexed. So what is this indexing mainly? This is nothing but your database. So whenever you are publishing an article, suppose a journal is indexed in Scopus, that means it is having a link or it is having a storage capacity in this Scopus database. So once your paper gets published, the journal will store that paper in this Scopus database, and everyone can fetch your paper from this Scopus database if it is a open access, or else if it is a closed access or subscription based, then one has to purchase that. Similarly, better than Scopus is your Web of Science. So Web of Science is nothing but a part of, you can say it is a part of Clarivate Analytics. So Clarivate Analytics is a system. Previously, there was the system known as Thomson Reuters, who gives the impact factor. You can see many journals are there nowadays. You can go through their website and they will write in big letters that impact factor is 5 point something. Impact factor is something like this, 8 point something. Impact factor is 20 point something. So at that time, what you have to check? You have to check whether these indexing services, what are the indexing services? If a journal is indexed in only in Scopus and it is showing some impact factor, that means that journal is providing some fault information, because a journal that is only indexed in Science Citation Index or Science Citation Index Expanded, these two journals, the journals that are indexed in these two databases, they can only have an impact factor that has been approved by the Clarivate Analytics. And the other journals that are showing some kind of impact factor, those are nothing but they have self-calculated that and they are providing that. So that impact factor will not be counted in any case. So similarly, in this Science Citation Index, it was provided by the Thomson Reuters that provides the impact factor that calculates the impact of a journal. Now, these Thomson Reuters had been taken over by the Clarivate Analytics. So, this Science Citation Index and Science Citation Index Expanded are both of these things are same. But what is the difference is that science earlier it was Science Citation Index, and everything, every papers that was published was stored in hard disk or floppy drives. So at that time it was a hardware where the Science Citation Index database was stored. But nowadays, with the number of increasing articles and number of publications, they were running short of this hard disk and floppy disk to store the data and as well as to retrieve the data when it is needed. So that is why it was again changed into Science Citation Index Expanded, where the data will be present in the web-based platform or cloud-based services. So previously it was hard disk or floppy disk, and now it has been changed into the web-based platform. These Science Citation Index journals are having impact factor. Science Citation Index Expanded journals are also having impact factor. Both belong to the same authority, that is the Clarivate Analytics. So it is no matter that whether you publish in Science Citation Index or in the Science Citation Index Expanded. But thanks to our Indian government system and to our CSIR DBT, whenever you go for a CSIR interview or something, they look for only Science Citation Index. They consider Science Citation Index uh, as the papers that have been indexed. If your paper is in Science Citation Index, then only they will consider your profile. Even if it is published in Science Citation Index Expanded, it will not be considered. But if you search it over Google, directly Thomson Reuters or Clarivate Analytics will show you that Science Citation Index is the expanded form, and within this Science Citation Index Expanded is your Science Citation Index. So SCI is a subset of SCIE. So previously it was SCI, now it has been more extended to SCIE. So SCI consists of some new journals that have been later on added to this to this impact factor list, along with some older journals that were present in the Science Citation Index. But God knows why that this CSIR and DBT, they all consider this Science Citation Index as the optimum metrics. Now, if we go for the field specific indexing, then for medical, someone who is doing a job in pharmaceutical or medical line, then they will opt for, along with Scopus and this Science Citation Index, they will also look for indexing like Medline, PubMed, and PubMed Central. So, what is the difference between these three? Medline, your PubMed is a larger database where there is all the medical journals are listed in this. Medical and pharmaceutical journals are listed in this. Where this Medline is a part. Previously, it was Medline, and later on, now it has been just like SCIE and SCIE. In the same manner, previously it was Medline, and now it has been PubMed. So within PubMed, Medline is a subset. And coming to the PubMed Central has been recently, very late, it has been organized or it has been constituted, and it is a, you can tell it is a PubMed Central means it is a database that has been prepared in the year of 2000, and it consists of all the open access articles. Any open access articles or any freely available articles that are listed in PubMed will be stored in this PubMed Central. And then your National Agricultural Accreditation System, so NAS. These kind of indexing services are looked upon by someone who is related to the agricultural field or some aquatic marine field or agricultural field. They go for this kind of NAS ratings. Then is your EI Compendex. So EI Compendex is nothing but any kind of engineering work. Those who are involved in engineering field, they look for such kind of indexing. Now, what are the tools to measure the journal impact? So, there are many tools for measuring the journal impact. So, one is your impact factor. Then, second one is your journal citation report. Third one is your source normalized impact per paper. And fourth one is the H index. So, here I have written it that tools to measure journal impact. So the impact factor, as you know, that this science citation index or science citation index expanded journals are having some kind of impact factor. So the more the impact factor, that means you can say that that particular journal is being referred, that particular journal is being read and is being cited and is being referred more number of times. That means that one is a more popular journal. Similarly, journal citation reports, this is nothing but a ranking system where it provides the rank of a journal. If I am submitting to, let us say, if I am submitting a paper to environmental chemistry letters, so it is a journal that is being published by Springer. So I will get impact factor. It has an impact factor of, let us say, 5.992. So I can know that yes, when it is an impact of 5.992, that means it is a very renowned journal. And then I'll go through the journal citation reports. That means it will be given a rank, that is this much, 26 out of, suppose it will be ranked as 5 out of 50. That means 50 of journals, among 50 journals in the field of environmental chemistry, this journal ranks as number 5. So that is the journal citation report. Similarly, it is the source normalized impact per paper. So it is the impact that is being obtained by a paper so it is the number of citations that are being obtained by a paper published in that particular year as compared to the number of papers published in the previous 3 years, divided by again the number of papers published by the previous 3 years. So this is a kind of matrix that you do not have to bother about, but the most important factor is the impact factor and the journal citation report. And another major factor is the H index. The more the amount of H index, that means the more amount of paper are being cited, the more amount of paper are being read from that particular journal. So as it says that do not judge a book by its cover, and so this is a phrase I have been given by some scholarly person. So, but this is my phrase, and so don't also judge a researcher with his or impact factor. So let me tell you that in the previous slide, as I told you, that tools to measure journal impact. So impact factor is a tool to measure the journal impact. Similarly, impact factor is never a tool to measure the impact of a researcher or profile of a researcher. So impact factor is variable and not actual metric of weighing research achievements. So whenever you go to a person or whenever you discuss with your some colleagues or buddies, then you ask them that we generally ask that if someone gets a paper published, then never ask that what is the impact of your paper. Always ask what is the impact of the journal, because the impact factor is always awarded to journal, and this is variable. So in the year 2018, a journal will be having an impact of suppose 3. So it does not mean that in 2019 the impact factor will be 3. It will either increase, let us say around 3.2, or it may decrease to 2. So in that case, how you can say that yes, I am having this? Some researchers, they boastly tell or they mention in their CV that I have published this and this papers. So there will be a long list of papers that they would have published, and in bracket they mention it as the impact factor. Why do you mention the impact factor? The impact factor is the journal, is not of your paper, but you are mentioning on your CV that this is the title of your paper. You are mentioning your paper, so you cannot mention what is the impact factor, because if your paper has got published in the year 2018 with the impact factor of 5, and in the 2019 the impact factor has changed to suppose you can say it has changed, the journal impact factor has changed to 5.6, then you cannot go on, it is not feasible to go on changing each and every year. Suppose you can think of a researcher who has been doing research in last 30 years and he has published more than 100 papers, then whether it would be feasible for him or her to go through each and every journal and each year change his impact factor in the CV. So that is actually not the impact factor, that is the that shows a researcher's achievement, but it is the H5 index or the H index that gives a better measure of one's research ability and acceptance. So so this can also be discussed in the details. Now coming to the peer review. So this is another important factor, that whenever we send a journal to a paper to a journal, then how this peer review occurs. So it is obviously taken care, headed by the editor in chief, followed by the associate editors. So then once the paper goes to the journal, then the editor in chief will first assign the particular paper to a associate editor. So if you're taking into regard your field of the field of the manuscript, suppose the field of the manuscript is based upon, suppose, microbiology, then he will send it to a associate editor within his journal who has a specialization in the field of microbiology. Then that particular associate editor will send that particular manuscript to three different reviewers. So that is called as peer review or peer blind review. So what is this? In this case, there are peer review can be of three types. One is a single blinded peer review, one is double blind peer review, and another one is open peer review. So in single blind peer review, what happens? Whenever you send the manuscript to the journal, and when that manuscript goes to the reviewer can see your name on the manuscript, but you cannot know who is the reviewer. So it is a kind of single blind. You are blindfolded, but the reviewer is not. The reviewer can know who you are and from which institution you belong. So also this is a kind of thing that has a demerit that I will discuss later on. Then is the double blind peer review. In this case, what happens? Before sending it to the reviewer, the associate editor removes all the article information like the author's name and affiliation from the paper. So the reviewer will receive a paper with only the heading followed by the abstract, no affiliations, no author names. So in this case, this one is a double blind peer review, where neither you can know who is the reviewer nor the reviewer can know who is the author. So, and currently now we are having a open peer review. Now this type of peer review is being nowadays encouraged, where not only the reviewer will know who is the author, but the author will get the details of the reviewer. So in this case, the demerit with the single blind peer review is that although you are not able to know who is the reviewer, but if the reviewer knows who are you, and if the reviewer has some kind of disturbances, or if the reviewer is some kind of enemy to you, he will deliberately reject your manuscript. Whereas it does not happen in case of double blind peer review, as it will be completely impartial, because no one is able to know who is it. And the third one is the open peer review, where there is also no problem, because even if a problem who is having some kind of disturbances with you will deliberately try to reject the paper, then you will get to know that who is the reviewer, and then you can follow the editor, or you can sue that reviewer if you think that your particular paper is that much effective and it should not be rejected. So that is all about this peer review. Now, when we are getting a review reports, then what it is, it can be accepted as it is, or it can be minor revisions, or it can be major revisions required, or it can be rejected. So these are some of the things that can come as a result of the review. So when it is accepted as it is, that means you do not have to make any changes. Sometimes it comes with minor revisions, which includes like arrangement of references, or adding some more extra table, or defining a figure properly. So these are the minor revisions. So whenever there is a minor revisions, most of the time there is a chance that your paper will get accepted. In maximum, in almost 99.9% of chances, there is a chance that the paper will get accepted in the minor revisions. Whenever it comes to major revisions, then the major revisions will also be accepted easily if you adhere to whatever the revision comments have been provided by the reviewer. So whatever the reviewer must be providing some comments that you have to add this, or you have to remove this, you have to explain about this. So if you go thoroughly through each comments, and if you give a befitting reply, and add these things that have been asked by the reviewer, then your paper will be having the chances of getting accepted. Or else the reviewer may directly reject your paper. So that is why I told that the reviewers are the paper is sent to three different reviewers. So out of that, the journals check they go with the reports of the majority of the reviewers. If two of the reviewers accept your paper, then your paper is accepted. If one of the reviewer rejects it, then also your paper gets accepted. But if one accepts and two rejects, then your paper gets rejected, and so on. So that is why, and if one accepts as it is, one gives you a major revision and another rejects you, then there will be around the comments will be like major revisions will be given to you. And there may be that sometimes the editor may return your paper before sending it to the review team or to the reviewer. If he finds that the article, the title of the manuscript is out of the scope or it is not within the scope of the journal. Suppose a journal is on environmental chemistry, and if you provide them a paper on plant biochemistry, then they may not plant biochemistry, which has no indication or which has no application in the field of environment, then they will return it mentioning that it is out of this scope. Now, facing rejections, this is one of the most worst thing that research scholars or students they come across, and I think that this should not be taken as a kind of discouragement, but an opportunity to prepare for the best. Because once your paper gets rejected, they will provide the idea for refinement of the article. Because once they are rejected, it will be accompanied with some kind of comments. The reviewer will mention that why they have rejected the article, or what are the things that are lacking in the article for which they have rejected that. Then you can modify that article and then increase the chance of publishing the same manuscript in a better journal. Because this is my personal experience, which I would like to share, that whenever when I sent one of my article in impact factor of I said that previously I sent it to a impact factor journal. uh, so it was a very renowned journal, a Springer journal, so having an impact factor of 1.3. So in that particular journal, my article was rejected after 1 month with the reviewers' comments. Not after 1 month. It was sorry. It was after 4 to 5 months. The reviewer rejected my manuscript, and there was heavy comments regarding to that manuscript. And without, if I would have got discouraged from that review reports, then I would have definitely not gone for another SCI journal. Because if my paper has been rejected from a 1.2 or 1.3 impact journal, then the next option for me, if I go for a lower choice, then it is Scopus Index journal, which does not has a impact factor. But what I did, I just tried to make the changes according to the reviewer comments, and then again I submitted the same paper to a journal having an impact factor of 3.7, and where it came with just minor revisions. It was accepted with minor revisions. So that is what the beauty of rejections are. So you never know that how capable you are or how your article can be changed to a better suitable journal. So that is why whenever it is rejected, don't be it is advised not to be discouraged and have to carry forward that comments for preparing a better publication. Now, another problem is the selection of appropriate journals. So, how we should select what are the appropriate journals? One, the first point is that the journal should be a peer-reviewed one. That means it should be sent to reviewers, those who belong from that particular field, but they should not belong to that. They should not be employee of that journal. They should be anonymous reviewers or independent reviewers. And then the second one is that the journal must not promise guaranteed publication. You can come up in the market, nowadays this publishing has become a business. So many journals, many publishing houses have started their own propaganda of selling their. They are actually not publishing the papers, but they are selling their journals, or they are selling your papers. In fact, so what happens? They will provide you. You must have seen that. They will be writing about the impact factors. They are very high impact factors, and the next thing what they do is that they will think about they will advertise that peer reviewed journals. They will write about peer reviewed journals, and they will write about fast processing, and they will charge an amount of around 10,000 or 15,000, and will be writing that review process to be completed within 3 days, publication within 1 week. So these are all the fraud journals minded that never to publish in such kind of journals. Because a peer review process, even if as far as my experience, whenever I review a paper from Springer or Elsevier, then they give a time frame of 20 to 30 days for one paper. That is why we the reviewers, even if we are also busy with our own time, so we don't we don't start reviewing a paper immediately once we get it. We check that yes, we have 20 days time, so let us keep it. After 10 or 15 days, then we'll start reviewing it. And we basically submit it just 2 to 3 days before the deadline. So this is actually the peer reviewed, how it is the peer reviewing is done. And to check for a paper for good quality, you need at least 4 to 5 days for complete reviewing, and 3 days of complete reviewing, and within 1 week publication, it is not at all possible. These journals uh, who are showing that they can do that, so these are all the fraud journals. And then is the journal must be indexed in reputed database. So as I was telling, some of the journals may also write that they are indexed in Scopus. But if you want to clarify, then go to the Scopus database, create your own account using your mail ID, and then over there you can search for that particular journal. You copy the ISSN number of that journal and paste it in the Scopus database and search for it. If it is present in the Scopus database, then it will show you. Or else if it does not show, that means that the journal is not indexed in Scopus and they are just lying about it. So the non-indexed journal must be avoided. Then the review time should not be too short, because whenever your paper is being accepted within 1 month, let us say if you are sending a paper to a journal and within 15 to 20 days it is being accepted, wherever you go and show that paper, someone will tell that yes, that means this paper is not of that much value, or it is of a below standard, it belongs to a below standard journal, because the review time is very short. And next is the contact details of the editorial office and other information must be present on the website. Many of the journals, they do not provide the details of the editorial office and other information. So these are the fraudster or the fraud journals. So you should avoid these kind of things. Then the reputation of the publishers should be taken into consideration. So just like this Springer and Elsevier, these are well reputed. Like this, there are many publishers that are reputed. So you have to know that who are these reputed publishers. You have to go through them. If you do not have any idea about the publisher, have a complete search about that publisher in the Google. See about its history. If it is an older publisher, let us say about 10, 12 years back, then it may be a reputed one. And then the journal should have a good H index value. It should follow COPE guidelines. That means Committee of Publication Ethics. So this is a Committee of Publication Ethics is a committee that prepares a guideline for the journal, for the authors, for the editors, and for the reviewers. That how one should review a paper, how one should prepare a paper, how a journal should function. So these are the guidelines. So these guidelines are being followed if by a journal, then you can tell that that journal is a trustable one. Then the journal should have zero tolerance towards plagiarism. So it should have a zero tolerance plagiarism policy. So that means even if you are sending a paper, let us say in about 15% plagiarism, you have checked it. Do one thing: if you have a doubt about a journal, prepare a 15% plagiarism. Prepare your paper which has, let us say, suppose it has a plagiarism of 20%. You change it to 10%, you bring it to 10%. But if you have a doubt on a journal, send that particular paper with that 20% plagiarism to that journal, and if it gets accepted, then you can know that what is the quality of that journal. Then is the journal must be able to provide a valid review report. Most of the times, many non-authentic journals, what they do, once you send your manuscript, they will directly send you that it is either, they will send you two reports, either accepted or rejected. Even if they send you the reject report, they will not send you any kind of review reports. Means why, or what are the reasons why, to how many reviewers had it gone, and what were their corresponding comments. They will not provide that. So if they don't provide a valid review report, then that journals are not supposed to be what that journals we should not rely upon. Then the journal must have an online submission system and must provide DOI numbers, because nowadays DOI numbers are in fashion. So these are the digital object identifiers. So once you click on that number, you will be directly taken to the journal website where the paper is displayed. So the journal must also have an online submission system. Most of previously it was like now many reputed journals are having an online submission system and a well organized website. But previously, some of the journals, what they do, they ask you for submission of these manuscripts through the mail. So better to select some journals which are having an online submission system, and they are also providing DOI numbers. Now, towards the end of this webinar, I would also like to discuss some of the important aspects like assumptions and reality. What do we really assume, and what is actually the ground reality? That I would discuss 2 or 3 slides. So, the assumption one is that more number of more number of publications in a year brings more accolades. So, we must be thinking that if we go for publishing more and more number of papers, that means the more the number of papers will be there, the more number of citations will be there, and we'll be getting more amount of praises from our colleagues, and our CV will be filled. But what is the reality actually? High number of publications will definitely result in less time being assigned to each manuscript. So if you are publishing 2 papers in a year, that means you are broadly giving 6 months of time to each paper. That means your paper has you are giving much enough of time to each paper. So your paper will be nicely written and it will have good data in it. But if you are publishing 12 papers in a year, that means you are giving 1 month of time to one paper. That means less time being given, and that means the quality of the manuscript will be low. Lower quality manuscripts won't be referred or read by others, leading to almost no citations and no addition to one's research profile. Because if it is a low quality manuscript, then nobody is going to cite it, and therefore your manuscript will never be considered in other job profiles or in other job interviews. Then the assumption two. Someone tells that I have a cumulative impact factor of 50.06. Just I said that if you have a cumulative impact factor of 50.06, then okay, now I have a cumulative impact factor. If someone says that I have a cumulative impact factor of 50.06 in the year 2020, then what about the cumulative impact factor in 2021? Will you go on adding each and every impact factor that has changed from each and every journal to again calculate the cumulative impact factor? And for that, the impact factor is only for the journals, not for the people or not for the researcher. Then the third assumption, I can use free software to change my manuscript's plagiarism level to 0, making it easy for me to publish. So this is the many way nowadays. Many scientists, many researchers. I have seen it in my own I have seen it in my own experience, in my own life. I've seen people doing this. They are using some amount of free kind of software to change the manuscript plagiarism. And there are, you will not believe, there are plagiarism softwares available over net that are free. And if your manuscript is having a 80% plagiarism, once you use that particular software, it will convert your manuscript's plagiarism of 80%. It will reduce your 80% plagiarism to 0% or below 10%. So it will be easy for publishing. But what is the reality? Yes, you can do that. So, but at the cost of the quality of the manuscript. Your plagiarism question may drop down along with the chances of your paper getting accepted in a good journal. That means your plagiarism question will definitely go down, but your chances of paper getting accepted in a good journal will also get down. Why? Because as I said you, this is one of the editorial I published, being the editorial board member of Biotech Express magazine. So this, what I mentioned it, spin to win the battle of publications. So recent trends of scientific fraud and misconduct in manuscript preparation. Just like I can give you a summary of this, that just like the spinners in the in the world of cricket, like famous spinners Shane Warne, Anil Kumble, Harbhajan, they used to deceive the batsmen through their googly or dusra, and then they used to bowl out the batsman. So the batsman was unable to catch hold of that delivery or understand that delivery. Similarly, now what these people are doing, they are using some amount of free softwares, like you can say the free article spinner is there, paraphrasing tools are there, article rewriter are there. Then they will change the wordings of the manuscript. So these articles do what they do, they will just replace or change the wordings of the manuscript. And in the process, suppose now this batsman is your plagiarism checking tool. So now this batsman gets dissolved by the this batsman gets what gold or deceived by this googly being thrown away by this software. So there will be a plagiarist software, but the writing should have changed. And now the results will be low standard manuscript, plagiarized contents, illegitimate publications. And who is responsible for that? Reviewers need to be more alert regarding this. So this was my conclusion on that. That not only the journals but the reviewers should be also very much alert towards this. So that is what we are into this, and we should check. We should not allow this to happen. And then uh, the assumption 4, I can publish confidently in a journal promising future publication and increase my paper numbers. So that is what I told you. You can do that also, but it won't help you in any way. Such journals are after money and make this a business operandi. The repute of such journals is almost equivalent to zero. Papers published in such journals will never count towards your own profile. So, in this case, as I said, the previous one about the spin to win the battle of publications, as I said, so I would definitely, some of you may not believe for this, so I would definitely like to show you on this practical knowledge on this. So, it will be more beneficial. So as I have already prepared this, now you can see this one is on my screen. There is a free article spinner. So it can be found on the Google. So you can try today after this webinar is over. But as it is said that in many of the uh, like you see the wrestling programs and tournaments where it has been written, do not try this at home. So it is my advice that do not try it in your own research, or else you will be doomed. So over here, this side we have your input text, and this one we have a output text. So I'll show you now how this manuscript is changing the words. Now this is a abstract from one of my paper. I'll copy it, and then I put it in the input text. So now do all the formalities like I am not a robot. It is taking a little time. Okay, by the time it gets over, we'll continue. So this was all about this. Uh, if anybody interested for this, we are going to conduct a scientific research writing and publication online training that is having around 36 number of classes, and it will be spread over a period of 3 months, where each and every details and online exposure and practically everything will be discussed. Starting from preparing research and review papers, thesis preparation, avoiding plagiarism, reference management, authorship issues, how to calculate the impact factor, how to calculate H index, how to publish, I mean, what the impact factor journals really want. So how you have to write your manuscript in such a way that it gets means accepted in the impact factor journals, and what the editors and reviewers really want. How we can use the statistical applications, like where to use some which statistical strategies. So these things, how to correct the grammars, and then how to increase your citations, because increasing a citation is also a trick. And then publishing will be providing you with publication support and many more other at with 10,000 INR for 3 months. But if there is a early bird registration, we have kept it at 50% discount, so 5,000 rupees for 3 months. If the registration is done by September 5, so the batches starts from 10 September 2020. So anybody can uh, give a call to give a call, or if interested can ping me on the WhatsApp number that has been provided below of this screen. That is 977-632-7537, or can alternatively mail at info@hdls.in. Okay, I would like to tell you that once there is, I think, some kind of problem due to network connectivity or something. You can do one thing. You can try this at your home after this webinar. That in this article spinner, you can put this some take a stanza, take a paragraph from one of the articles, and then copy it in the input text field. And then after that, clicking I am not a robot, once it gets activated, then you can put this spin text. You can click on this spin text, and you will get the output results on this right hand side. And then you can actually compare that what is the uh, means what is the difference between these two articles. Why I told you, because in this case the words will be changed like nothing. So if it is stable toxic metallic element, it will give you something different. It will change each and every words in this input text, the text part that has been inputted. It will change all these words, and then the output, what it will be completely non-scientific. So whoever is going to read your article, he will be either in a dilemma or he will be frustrated after going through your article, and your article will face rejection. So thank you all. Any questions?
Sir, kindly allow the feedback form.
Which one?
Hello?
Yeah, yes.
Yes, sir. Kindly feedback link in the chat box, please.
Yeah, feedback link will be sent to you around today evening through that group only. Are there any
Where,
questions?
sir? On our email IDs.
Yeah, no, in the
So I
group.
have a question.
In the group, yeah. Yeah, please. Someone was having a question.
So you said about that impact.
Yeah,
So I have a question. So
yeah, yeah,
so
please.
you said about that impact from the journal. So sir, actually I have not means totally understand that point. So that I am asking that what's this point of 50.06 and 5 point some. something. Means
No, actually,
what it will from what it will be helpful.
yeah, actually, impact is nothing but if suppose you have now published a paper, right? In the year 2019, you have published a paper, and that paper is being referred. Means I have now taken your paper, I have taken some data from your paper, and I am using it in my paper. That means obviously in my paper I'll give your paper's reference, right? So once I provide your reference,
Yes, sir.
that means your paper will get one citation, right? So the number of citations that go on increasing. So the in the if the number of citations goes on increasing, there is a calculation that the number of paper published in one the number of paper that has been cited in a year is divided by number of papers published in previous 3 years. Then will give you a impact factor of the journal. That means if in this 2019 one of the journal A has got around 30 citations, and in the previous 3 years it has published 90 papers. Then the impact factor for the 2019 is 30 divided by 90, so it will be around 0.3, right? So like this it is the impact factor is calculated. So the more the number of citations, that means the more the impact factor. So the more the impact factor, that means the more is the journal being referred, or more number of people is are following your journal. Just like the way you
Okay,
the,
sir.
the more number of followers are in Instagram, the more popular you are. In the same way, the more
Okay, sir.
the impact, so the more popular is the journal.
Okay, so sir, one more question. Sir, you said about that fake journals and some means fake sites. So if someone means some journal will I will publish a research article and they will review in free of cost. There or in some nominal charge. So they are okay or not?
I didn't get you. Can you repeat
Means
the
they are
question?
fake or real? So,
Which one?
if I will publish my research paper to some journal, okay, if they charge me some money for publication, is it correct or if
No,
they are agree for free of cost?
no. Not all journals are fake like that, because some of the journals, if they provide you a open access, then they will charge you. That means if your journal you can freely post it after publication, if you can post it your paper anywhere, then you have to provide a payment. Just I said. So there are some journals that charge, but there are some other journals also they do not charge. So in that case, you can go for you can check for the eligibility if they are indexed in Scopus, and if that one is a older journal. Let us say means not that much old. At least we should have a journal. We should publish in a journal that is at least a 7 or 8 years old journal. That means we can know that yes, it is already in the Indian market. So we can have some amount of trust. So demanding,
Thank
because
you, sir.
there are some of the journals like in 2 or 3 journals where I am the reviewer, I am the editorial assistant, editorial advisory member, like Journal of Applied Biology and Biotechnology, Journal of Applied Pharmaceutical Science. These are very good journals, but they charge as they are allowing you to openly publish your paper after the publication, because they are providing open access services. So they charge around 4,000 or 5,000 rupees per paper, but they are indexed in PubMed and in also Scopus. And I think there is a question from Hare Krishna Panda. Which Indian peer-reviewed bioscience or biomedical journals publish research articles or review articles for free of cost or take nominal charges for publication? Sir, I can tell you that you can better go for a journal like Defense Life Science Journal. There is a journal named as Defense Life Science Journal. So it is being published by DRDO, Defense Research Development Organizations, and I have also one of my paper published in that, and they are publishing on various multiple disciplines. It is multidisciplinary, so it is also free of cost and it is also open access in that journal. but it will require some time because the review period is around 5 to 6 months, and the publication time is around publication turnaround time is around 1 year. So you have to wait for 1 year to get one article published, but the citations coming from that particular journal are very good. Any questions? Okay. Thank you all. We'll be shortly posting the feedback link in the WhatsApp group, so you can provide your feedback. And I'll also be if you have any other queries, then you can mail us in the mail ID info@hdls.in, or in that WhatsApp group itself. Thank you. Thank you all.